Hello, dear friend. I'm glad you're here with me. While you watch these two moons appear layer by layer, I'll tell you a quiet story about them and about a night that finally remembered how to rest. At the very edge of town, there was a willow that everybody knew and nobody owned. It grew where the last garden fences ended, where streetlights stopped and the sky began. People hung small things on its branches, a lost ribbon, a tin star, a dried wreath, as if the tree were a patient keeper of forgotten wishes. One autumn, after a week of rain, two moons appeared there. No one saw who tied them. In the morning, they simply were. One moon was black, not flat ink, but deep midnight, with faint golden scratches across his face, as if comets had written on him and faded. His eyes were closed, his long nose pointed down, mouth curved in a quiet, contented dream. The other moon was white, not harsh, but soft, candle wax, parchment white, with fine cracks like old porcelain. Her single eye was half-lidded, watching the path, the river, and anyone passing by. They hung from one branch, not quite touching. When the wind rose, they swung toward each other and away again, like two clocks keeping different time. Children named them first. The sleeping one they called drowsy. The watching one they called wakeful. Adults pretended not to use those names, but when they passed the willow alone, their thoughts chose them anyway. The willow knew the truth. These were not ornaments. They were pieces of sky sent down to help this particular town sleep. One moon to sleep for everyone, one moon to stay awake. The person who visited them most often was a girl named Mira. Her home was small and lively, clatter of dishes, school books on every surface, her father's alarm clock forever ringing for the next early shift. Mira loved it all, but sometimes the noise and worry piled up inside her like an overfilled drawer. On those days, she went to the willow. She sat on the stone under the branch and spoke to the moons like neighbors in upstairs windows. "Drowsy," she sighed once. "Today, my mind climbed out of the classroom and sat on a cloud instead of doing maths." Or, "Wakeful, my best friend is moving away. Everyone says I'll make new friends, but I didn't ask for new ones. I asked for her." Drowsy never replied. He only slept, gathering sharp thoughts and heavy worries and turning them into softer dreams. Wakeful listened. Sometimes Mira felt that the white moon's eye narrowed kindly, or that a tiny warmth touched her cheek like a silent answer. Long ago, the sky had decided that this restless little town needed two crescent moons of its own, one to keep the lights of hope, one to hold the dark of fears. For many seasons, the arrangement worked. Children slept enough to grow, bakers woke on time, bus drivers stayed safely awake. Time moved on. Wakeful stayed awake. Drowsy slept. They worked hard, but they never really spoke to each other, and the night grew tired. It began on a Tuesday. The town went to bed as usual, some gladly, some reluctantly, some with phones in their hands. Wakeful glowed in the willow. Drowsy sank into his familiar sleep. Yet the dark did not settle. Mira lay awake in her small room. Her test, her friend leaving, her father's tiredness, the feeling that the world always wanted more. Her thoughts walked in circles. At last, she pushed open the window and looked towards the willow. The moons were there, but different. Wakeful's glow flickered at the edges, like a lantern running low. Drowsy's blackness had thinned. Mira could see tiny specks of starlight where solid shadow used to be. "Wakeful?" she whispered. "Are you all right?" The answer arrived like a thought she didn't quite think herself. "We are full," said a soft voice in her mind. Too many waking worries, too many fears brought into bed. Mira's chest tightened. "Is that because of me?" she asked. "Because I talk so much?" "Not just you," Wakeful replied gently. "Everyone. They lie down, but their minds do not. We've been carrying it for a very long time." Behind her words, Mira heard a deep, slow snore, like thunder under blankets. "Can't Drowsy help?" she asked. "He's always sleeping. Isn't he rested?" "That is the trouble," Wakeful said. "He has forgotten what it means to wake. I keep watch, he keeps sleeping. Even the sky can forget balance." Mira looked from one moon to the other and felt suddenly older than her years. "Then maybe the night needs to change," she said quietly. "Just a little." The next afternoon, Mira did something small and brave. She took a notebook to the willow and wrote down the thoughts that usually kept her awake. "I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid I'll never be good enough for the places I haven't seen yet." On paper, they looked smaller than they had inside her. She pressed her palm over the words, tore out the page, folded it carefully, and tucked it into a crack in the willow's bark. "Please hold these for a while," she whispered to the tree, "so Wakeful doesn't have to." That night, she climbed out of her window, onto the shed roof, and up to the low branch where she could almost touch the moons. "Wakeful," she called softly, "I think Drowsy needs to wake up, just a little." The white moon's eye shone with tired humor. "Waking is easy to suggest," she said, "and hard to do, for moons and for people. But if he never wakes, he'll never see what he's dreaming for, and you'll never rest. That's not a story, it's a loop." The night held its breath. From the dark crescent came a slow, rolling voice. "How," Drowsy murmured, "do you wake a moon, little one?" Mira almost dropped back onto the roof. She had never heard him speak. "We usually use tea," she said honestly, "or very loud birds." Wakeful's laugh was a soft silver hiss. Drowsy's almost laugh darkened the snow with warmth. "There is an old song," Wakeful said at last. "It was sung when the sky first learned to open and close its eyes. I remember how it rises. I remember how it falls," Drowsy added. Mira's heart thumped. "Then sing it together," she whispered. "Even if you don't remember it perfectly, maybe the night will understand what you mean, not just what you say." The moons hesitated. They had spent so long in separate roles that being wrong together felt scarier than being tired alone. The willow's branches shivered encouragement. The stars leaned in. Mira folded her hands and waited. Drowsy drew in a deep breath, gathering the hush of people finally letting go. Wakeful gathered the soft light from bedside lamps and kitchen windows. Together, they began to hum. It was not a tune you could write down. It sounded like the moment after a parent whispers, "Good night," and before the room goes quiet. Like a cloud crossing the moon, like someone turning a page in the dark. Shadow and brightness wove around each other. Mira's thoughts, which had been marching, sat down and listened. Dogs shifted, then settled. The town's clocks lost track of the exact minute and did not mind. On the lowest, longest note, something changed. Drowsy's eyelids lifted. For the first time in anyone's memory, the black moon opened his eyes. They were not sharp. They were deep and calm, like the middle of a lake at night. "Ah," he said quietly to Wakeful, "there you are." Wakeful felt her own eye grow heavy. "I'd like to sleep," she admitted. "Then sleep," Drowsy replied. "I will watch." The night did not explode or bend inside out. It simply shifted. A student stopped reading bad news and put the phone face down. A baker worrying about money noticed the dough rising perfectly and took one slow, grateful breath. A boy who thought he'd ruined everything remembered one kind thing he'd done and decided to try again tomorrow. Mira, in bed with her window open, felt the air soften. Wakeful's light dimmed as her lashes finally closed. At the same time, a gentle glow rose from Drowsy. He watched the town without hurrying anyone. He watched dreams gather that were still complicated but no longer sharp enough to cut. He watched Wakeful sleep, her cracked white face holding the faint shine of saved wishes. Very softly, he hummed the last line of the old song just for her and for the girl who lay listening in her small room. "Thank you," Mira mumbled into her pillow, not sure whom she meant, and slid into the easiest sleep she'd had in a long time. Morning arrived, as it stubbornly does. The sky turned a washed teacup blue. The willow shook the frost from its branches. Drowsy and Wakeful hung side by side, both awake now, both quieter. They hadn't swapped colors. He was still dark and gold-scratched, she still pale and cracked. But there was a new ease between them, as if a knot in the night had been loosened. "How was it, watching?" Wakeful asked. "Like finally reading the book I'd been dreaming," Drowsy said. "And you?" "Like closing the book on my chest and knowing it would wait," she answered. They swung gently on their ribbon. The town had survived their experiment. So had the sky. Nothing dramatic had broken. Balance, they realized, was less a perfect line and more a conversation. From then on, they promised to take turns. On heavy evenings, when thoughts were loud and hearts were sore, Drowsy would keep his eyes open to help carry the weight. On softer nights, when wishes were light and worries had already been spoken aloud, Wakeful would stay brighter, and Drowsy would sleep deeper, refilling the quiet. Sometimes both were half awake, making strange, glowing hours when someone sat up at 3 a.m., wrote one odd sentence in a notebook, and later discovered it was exactly what they needed. Mira kept visiting the willow. She still talked, but she also spent long minutes saying nothing at all. On those silent days, she could feel Wakeful's half-closed eye crinkle in approval, and Drowsy's calm gaze rest on her like a blanket. The night was not perfect now, but it was no longer alone in its work. You might pass through that town one day and never notice the willow. Or you might take the wrong turn on purpose because something in you is too tired to go straight home. You'll walk past the last fences and find the narrow path to the river. The branches will whisper overhead, and you'll see two small moons hanging side by side, one dark, one pale, one more awake, one more sleepy, changing roles as they please. You may feel, for no logical reason, that it is suddenly allowed to be tired and hopeful at the same time. Later in your own bed, you might remember a wish you never quite dared to say out loud. If you whisper it into the dark, somewhere a willow will stir. Drowsy will carry the sharpest edge of it into a soft dream, and Wakeful will tuck the rest into the tiny cracks of her face, keeping it safe until you are ready to meet it in daylight. Thank you for staying with me and these two moons until the end of their story. There are so many louder, faster things in the world, and it means a lot that you spent this quiet piece of time here with a handmade creature, a slow tale, and a process unfolding layer by layer. If this story kept you gentle company, I'll be very grateful for your like, comment, or subscribe. This kind of soft support helps me keep creating more creatures and moons. Take good care of yourself, sleep when you can, and I'll see you in the next tale.